In this video, you're going to get a streamlined tour of the top 7 adverbs in Spanish. Not just the definitions, but extremely practical ways to use them. If you stick through the video, you'll be primed to use all the most common adverbs in Spanish with confidence, and not like a student, but like a native speaker. We'll even cover the most important uses of ya, so that you can start using it really frequently as native speakers do. You'll also learn to use como properly and not sound like a complete dork when you try to use it, as students often do. If you want to learn fluent Spanish, you're smart to start with the most common words. The true most common words are the ones that are used so frequently that they appear in basically every single Spanish conversation, so obviously you want to learn these before anything else. These are mostly pronouns, conjunctions, prepositions, and adverbs. Today we'll work on adverbs, and instead of beating around the bush, we'll start with the very most common adverbs and work our way down the list. In each case, I'll show you all the most common uses of the word. It would be silly just to give you a definition because these words don't translate perfectly between languages, and obviously you're wanting to speak using these words, not just memorize a definition. The most common adverb in Spanish is no, which generally means not. This is used extremely frequently, 5 times more often than any other adverb. In fact, it's used much more often than we use the word not in English. Because think about it. In English, we can negate a sentence in lots of ways, using words like can't and won't and didn't. Well, in each of those cases, in Spanish, we would use no. That makes it tricky, though, because usually when you have an English sentence that involves a negative, you have to restructure it to work it into Spanish. I'm about to show you how. Don't get too freaked out, though, because this won't take forever. Once you learn where to place no in a sentence, you know how to use a lot of other adverbs as well. The word no really sets a good example for other adverbs. Let's use this example. She can't be at the house. The word can't is a contraction that doesn't exist in Spanish, but if we untie the not, so to speak, the sentence goes, she cannot be at the house. By default, you might think that this would turn into, she can no be at the house. But adverbs don't tend to work that way. Generally, the adverb no is going to go before the verb structure can be. In Spanish sentences, verbs like to stay in their own little clique and stay together with no interruption. So to leave them alone, we'll put the no before the can be. She no can be at the house. If you don't like the way I'm mixing up the Spanish and English, here's the sentence fully in Spanish. Ella no puede estar en la casa. This video is a lesson on adverbs, so don't get too distracted if you don't know some of the other words in the sentence. Just focus on the adverb no and how it's placed. However, as a side note, I'll mention that all the words in this video that are in Spanish are in the top 100 most used words in Spanish, so they're worth knowing. Watch my other videos if you want to focus on those as well. Okay, so here's another sentence example. I don't have that. Once again, if you untangle the not, it's I do not have that. Saying do not have seems to split up the verbs do and have, so we'll put the no at the beginning like we did before. Now it's I no do have that. Now this is where it gets a bit weird because to Spanish speakers, the idea of do have is really wacky. They simply don't understand the idea of putting do before another verb. Instead, they simply use the other verb by itself. In other words, instead of saying, I do not have that, they say, I not have that, or yo no tengo eso. That's definitely worth practicing one more time, so here's another sentence. You don't know it? From the word don't, we'll untie the not and then put it before the verbs. You no do know it? Then we'll remove the extraneous do. You no know it? I'll provide this entirely in Spanish, but some funky things are going to happen to the pronouns, so don't get freaked out by this. You can always look up how pronouns are used another time, or watch my other videos. For now, focus on how no is being used. Not it, you know? No lo sabes? All right, let's learn 6 more adverbs. Again, these are absolutely by far the most common adverbs in Spanish, and the best news of all is that if you learn how to use these, you can use other adverbs the same way. We'll start with the opposite of no, which is sí. Now, don't get too excited. You may have been taught before that sí means yes, but I'm sorry, it's not that simple. Actually, while the word sí is positive rather than negative, it's actually used in the exact same way as the word no, or not. Let me show you. So our first example was, she can't be at the house, or ella no puede estar en la casa. If we switch out the no for sí, we get, ella sí puede estar en la casa. What the heck? Why on earth would you throw sí into a sentence like that? In English, we don't say, she yes can be at the house. So, this sentence is perfectly natural to native Spanish speakers. There's nothing weird about it at all to them. Ella no puede estar en la casa. Ella sí puede estar en la casa. To them, those are both quite natural. So why do we do this? Just like the word no is used to negate a sentence, the word sí is used to affirm a sentence. This is something that we do in English as well, actually. We just don't realize it because we do it in a different way. Let's take this other example that we used before. I don't have that, or yo no tengo eso. This is something I might say in an argument to emphasize that I don't have something. But if I'm arguing the opposite, I might emphasize that I do have something. So I would say, I do have that. The word do there is unnecessary. I could just say, I have that. But I'm using the do for emphasis. I do have that. Well, if you recall what I said earlier, Spanish speakers never use do before another verb. So instead of doing that, if they wanted to emphasize something like this, they'll use sí. So once again, compare the two sentences. Yo no tengo eso, and yo sí tengo eso. One is a negation, and one is an affirmation. And the words no and sí are used exactly the same way at the same spot in the sentence. We'll practice that one more time with the question that we used earlier. You don't know it, or no lo sabes. Now let's switch it around. You do know it is sí lo sabes. Now, of course, the words no and sí can also be used by themselves to mean no and yes, just as those words are used in English. But this other use is more syntactically important for understanding the Spanish language. I recommend practicing it more because you really want to start thinking like a native speaker. All right, next up we have a pretty simple adverb, bien. Bien literally means well, as in excellently. Now, there's a general rule about most adverbs. They're functionally very often used to answer a how question. The word bien is exhibit A. So, for example, how did you do on the test? Could be answered with, I did well. That would be bien. It answers a how question. But as usual, the translation between languages isn't quite that simple. Bien is used a whole lot more often than we use the word well in English. It's associated with all kinds of positive emotions, so let's try to think about it that way. Here's an example. He is well, or he is bien. If you want to put that entirely in Spanish, it's él está bien. Uh-oh. Does it bother you, like it bothers me, that we can't use bien exactly the same way that we used our other adverbs, no and sí? Instead of being before the verb in the sentence, the word bien seems to be after the verb. We could try to use our previous sentence examples, like ella no puede estar en la casa, but ella bien puede estar en la casa, although it doesn't have any glaring grammatical errors per se, native speakers would never use bien that way. It's almost always used at the end of a phrase. That's okay, though, because a lot of adverbs are used that way. Some typically go at the beginning of a sentence, some usually go at the end, and most can actually move around freely. Adverbs are nice that way. But for now, let's just focus on the most common uses, and we'll earn some freedom after we're comfortable with these. All right, back to our example. He is well. él está bien. The idea is that he's doing well or excellently.
In English, we sometimes say he's doing fine or he's doing good. But if you happen to have a friend, like me, who's a stickler for proper grammar, you'll hear the word well more often, because theoretically, a how question should always be answered by an adverb.
Bien fulfills this function beautifully, so it's used extremely often in Spanish. The other most common use for bien, other than how someone is doing, is how things are doing in general. You can describe a situation as being well. So where in English we would say it's fine, in Spanish you would say está bien. Actually, this is a case where even a grammar Nazi like me wouldn't use well. I don't go around telling people, it is well, at least not anymore. I just say, it's okay, or it's all right, or it's fine. All of those in Spanish would be summed up in está bien. Our next adverb is aquí, and it's probably the easiest word we're learning in this video. Aquí means here, and for once this word translates pretty directly between languages. Now, functionally, this word is used a whole lot like bien. For example, instead of saying he is well or él está bien, we can say he is here or él está aquí. Another nice thing is that aquí doesn't have a strong preference whether it's at the beginning or the end of a sentence. It's a super versatile adverb. In general, you can just tack it on to almost any sentence at the beginning or the end. Let's demonstrate this with the first sentence example we used. Ella no puede estar en la casa. We can change this to aquí ella no puede estar en la casa. Or ella no puede estar en la casa aquí. There's really not much more to say about this word because it's so easy to use. I'll provide some more examples of it at the end of the video. Our next word is muy, which is almost as easy to use as aquí. It means very, pretty much the same way that very is used in English. This word comes with a caveat. It's always used before an adjective or another adverb. Oh, and speaking of caveats, a pet peeve of mine is when English speakers pronounce this word like moi, which is not a word. It's muy. So if you moo like a cow, you'll pronounce it more like a native speaker. Muy. Okay, so you can't actually use the word very by itself. Something is usually very tall, very strange, very nice, and so on. So here it's being used before an adjective. You are very nice. This would be, you are muy nice. Or entirely in Spanish, eres muy bueno. An example of using muy before an adverb would be muy bien, or very well. This is actually one of the most common two-word combinations in Spanish. You'll hear this everywhere. Sometimes it's almost strange to use the adverb bien without muy before it. Our previous example, he's doing well, or él está bien, can be strengthened as he's doing very well, or él está muy bien. So muy always has to have another word after it, generally an adjective or an adverb. That's because it falls into a particular category of words, which I call degree modifiers. This can be demonstrated simply by replacing very with other degrees. Instead of he's doing very well, we can say he's doing extremely well, which would be stronger, or he's doing kind of well, which would be weaker. These are all different strengths or degrees of being well. So in your mind, file the word muy away as a degree modifier. There are a bunch of those in Spanish, much more than you might think, and they're used in the exact same way that muy is used. So it's good to have a category in your mind for these words. Now for the strange word ya. This is the signature word in another category of Spanish adverbs. See, adverbs often answer the question of how, as in bien, or where, as aquí. But there's a huge category of adverbs that pertain to time, adverbs that answer the question when. In English, the most common time adverb is now. Other adverbs pertaining to time are meanwhile, yesterday, tomorrow, later, and so on. These can all be used to indicate when something happens. However, the word now in English does not have a simple, direct translation into Spanish. In Spanish, the most common time adverb is ya. The word ya can mean now, but when it does, it's in a very specific sense. It indicates that something has recently changed. So here's an example. Now I have it. Ya lo tengo. So what ya is indicating here is that something is different. Maybe I didn't have the thing before, but now I have it. I didn't have it before, but ya, I do have it. All right, here's a similar example, but with an opposite meaning. Now I don't have it. Ya no lo tengo. This could be translated as now I don't have it, but in English we'd be more likely to say something like, I don't have it anymore. Once again, the indication is that something recently changed. Actually, in general, the most universally accurate translation of ya is anymore. That's a nice word that indicates that something has changed recently. But ya is used in many, many more ways than just the word anymore. Unfortunately, some Spanish teachers try simply to teach that ya means already. But although it can be used that way, it's seriously one of the least common uses of the word. Try to think of it as indicating a specific moment in time, the present, with the subtle meaning that something has probably changed recently. Let's practice this with a couple more examples, this time starting with the Spanish instead of the English. So the example is, ella ya no está en casa. She ya is not at home. So this is pretty simple. She's not at home anymore. Okay, now how about this one? Pero ya sabes. That means, but ya, you know. This could mean, but now you know, or but you already know. It's a little ambiguous, actually, so we would need more context to know which way to translate it. Either way, the person we're talking to knows something in the present moment. As you continue to learn Spanish, you'll find that there are several more uses of ya in idioms, or funny little phrases that mean non-literal things, such as desde ya. But for now, I recommend just working on ya to mean now or anymore, and the other stranger uses will come with time. Our last word is como, which is an evil, evil word that has torn apart families and destroyed kingdoms throughout history. My brother and I argued about this word for 45 minutes while on a walk with some friends, and we completely destroyed the nice evening that the girls wanted to have. That was so fun. In reality, we were arguing about the English word as, which is pretty much the equivalent of como in Spanish. Now, he insisted that as is a preposition or a conjunction, but I maintained that it's an adverb, which is, after all, what the dictionary calls it. It really doesn't fit into any category nicely. It's an entity unto itself. The problem here is that como can't be used by itself like no, ya, aquí, and bien. But it's also not used to modify adjectives and adverbs as muy is. Instead, it's generally used before either a noun or an entire sentence. Really, the only way I know of to understand the word como is simply as the word as in English when it's used as an adverb. So let's use some examples. I have it as you know. Yo lo tengo como tú sabes. As you can see, there are two full clauses or complete sentences here. I have it and you know. But they're sort of joined together by the word como. Normally, this is the role of a conjunction. Watch my video on conjunctions to understand that. But como is not considered a conjunction. Another example is, he has to do it as I have to do it. Él lo tiene que hacer como yo lo tengo que hacer. In this case, we're comparing the way that things are done, once again answering the word how, as adverbs tend to do. This sentence is pretty long, so let's see if we can shorten it to a shorter example. He has to do it as I. Él lo tiene que hacer como yo. Okay, guys, I heard that sound of clenching teeth. You really want to change that English sentence to, he has to do it like me. The fact is that the word como is often translated as like in English. But be careful about starting to think of como as like, because that can lead to some dangerous areas. Try just to think of it as, and remember that Spanish speakers really like the word as, or como. Here's another example. These two are as those. Estas dos son como esas. Once again, you'll want to think of the como as like, but don't get carried away with that. We can translate it as instead, even though it makes for some sort of quaint, awkward English. One more thing. If you aren't already exhausted by the complications of the word como, I have to point out one more thing. In English, we use the word as in multiple different ways. Look at this sentence. I did it as he did it. This can actually mean two different things. I did it like he did it, or I did it while he did it. So those are two different meanings of the ambiguous English phrase. The word como only refers to the former meaning. I did it the way that he did it, or I did it as he did it. See, there's a different word for while he did it. So when you use como to mean as, remember that it never means while. If you stuck through this video, you're braver than some. Stick with it for just a little longer, and we'll get some practice with all of these adverbs. Following are some sentence examples that use all of the adverbs that we learned in this video. But actually, all of the examples are based on just one sentence. We're practicing using the adverbs in different ways to modify just one basic sentence. Now, in each case, I'm going to provide the English first, and I want you to think ahead of time about how the adverb is going to fit into the sentence. So this is a great way to practice and to test yourself at the same time. Okay, the first sentence is, she's here as you now know. Yeah, you can see there are a few adverbs there, right? So she is here as you now know. She is aquí como ya you know. These are pretty typical ways to use these adverbs. This is a nice, good example of all three of these adverbs being used. Okay, another example. This is kind of similar, but it's going to be a little different. She's not very well, as you already know. She's not very well, as you already know. So the answer is, she no is muy bien, como ya you know. All right, kind of based on that one, here's another one. She is very well, as you now know. Now note the emphasis on is. We're trying to emphasize that something is indeed true. So, she is very well, as you now know. She sí is muy bien, como ya you know. All right, one more example. She is here like me. She is here like me. Once again, emphasizing the positive here. She sí is aquí como yo. Kind of a beautiful thing here is that if you practice just these 4 sentences over and over and you say them out loud, you'll be getting some really good adverb practice in just a short period of time. Saying these sentences enough times while understanding what you're saying will actually gradually reprogram your mind to think about Spanish adverbs as a native speaker does. All right, get in check with your feelings. You really should be more excited than you are right now. I mean, half the time that you hear an adverb in Spanish, it's going to be one of these 6 adverbs. If you can actually use them properly, as shown in this video, you'll sound more like a native speaker than almost any of your friends using Spanish that are relying simply on definitions of words. So if you found this useful, you can hit that subscribe button so that you can get more videos like this. A few upcoming videos will cover more extremely commonly used words, so if you want to keep learning to speak like a native speaker, stay tuned. Oh, and if you want a fun way to practice all of these adverbs in context, click the link in the description. A native-speaking writer that I know wrote this really cute dialogue between 2 little girls playing with their toys, and it includes real-life examples of all of these adverbs in context, as a native speaker might use them. Actually, it intentionally includes pretty much all of the most frequent Spanish words, so it's a super handy tool to practice with. It includes a recording of 2 native speakers who professionally produced it so you can listen to the conversation live, and there's an English translation side by side with the Spanish. Stay tuned for more videos if you want to practice Spanish prepositions, which are extremely tricky, conjunctions, which are simple, and pronouns, which, well, you'll see soon.